It was the kind of evening you don't forget. Not because something beautiful happened, but because something inside you quietly collapsed, and no one in the room noticed. Our living room had been turned into a pastel arena of anticipation. Blue and pink balloons lined the ceiling. A cake with white frosting waited on the table, hiding the answer to the question everyone came for. My mother was there, her parents too, friends, co-workers, neighbors. We had made a performance of happiness, and I played my part with such conviction, I almost believed myself. She was radiant that night, not in the way I remembered from years past, when her smile meant she was happy to see me, when her laugh came from something I'd said and not from a text notification she tried to hide. No, this was a different kind of shine, like someone wearing joy as a disguise, crafted carefully for an audience. She handed me the box like it was part of the plan. Our plan. Everyone turned. Drinks paused mid-air. Voices lowered to murmurs. I felt that suspended breath of a room waiting to exhale. I opened the lid slowly, expecting a pair of booties, or maybe a baby onesie in blue or pink. Instead, a white envelope. No one else could see what was inside, only my reaction. But I didn't give them one. The card read, "I'm leaving. We're too different. And I need a new path."
No punctuación. No warmth.
Not even my name. Someone clinked their glass by accident. My uncle coughed into his fist. My best friend gave a confused laugh, thinking it was some elaborate joke. I stood there for a second too long, holding that box like it weighed more than anything I'd ever carried. And then I smiled. Not the smile of a man at peace. Not even a mask. Just the kind of smile you wear when everything inside you is tearing, and the only thing left to do is act like you're above it. She didn't flinch, didn't look away, just stood there, chin slightly raised, like she'd finally done something brave. I wanted to ask her when she'd made this decision. At what point had she traded our future for some vague new path? But I didn't speak. That was the last thing I gave her. My silence. I didn't follow her out when she left. I didn't say a word to the guests who hovered awkwardly by the wine table, whispering to each other, unsure whether to offer sympathy or pretend nothing had happened. I just walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stared at the wall like it might give me answers. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in our bed, surrounded by everything we'd built. The framed sonogram on the dresser, the overnight bag we'd packed for the hospital, her perfume still sharp in the air. And still, I didn't cry, because sometimes pain doesn't look like tears. Sometimes it's just silence, louder than any scream. The morning after, the house was a battlefield dressed in decorations. Stray ribbons curled like abandoned intentions on the floor. Balloons, mocking reminders of celebration, swayed gently with the fan, as if nothing had happened. But everything had. I walked through it barefoot, each step crunching soft bits of confetti underfoot, each one whispering you were the last to know. The worst part wasn't the note. Not really. It was the clarity that followed. A kind of brutal, surgical realization that this hadn't been sudden. You don't write a message like that in one afternoon. You don't hand over a goodbye like a party favor unless you've rehearsed the exit a dozen times in your head. By midday, I started noticing the signs she'd left behind. Signs I had chosen not to see. Her closet had gaps. Favorite shoes missing. The top drawer of her vanity completely empty, as if she had scrubbed her presence clean. She hadn't packed in a hurry. No, this was premeditated, executed with precision, calculated cruelty masked as self-discovery. The first real crack in my composure came when I found her calendar still magnetized to the fridge. It had hearts drawn around the due date. She'd crossed out a prenatal class we were supposed to attend next week, scribbled something in tiny, faint ink beneath it. I squinted. Don't pretend this is working. I stared at it for minutes, trying to understand what kind of person drops a truth like that on a calendar. Who leaves those words hanging in a house shared with someone who still believed in them? I didn't call her. Couldn't. There was nothing left to ask that wouldn't make me look smaller. She had said everything she needed to say in that note. We're too different. A polite way of saying you no longer serve the version of me I want to become. I didn't believe it was about difference. I believed it was about distraction. Somewhere out there was a voice louder than mine, a mirror that flattered her more than I ever could. I didn't know who he was yet, but I felt his shadow in every detail she left behind. By evening, I opened her laptop. Not to snoop, not really, but because it was the only thing of hers that hadn't left with her. She'd logged out of everything. Of course she had. But in the downloads folder, she'd missed one thing. Picture. Blurry. Cropped. Two hands holding each other across a table I didn't recognize. One hand wore the ring I bought. I didn't rage. I didn't shout. But something in me turned off. A light, a switch, a tether. Whatever name you want to give it. It just stopped. I closed the laptop, unplugged it, and placed it gently in a box with the rest of her forgotten things. That night, I sat in the dark, no music, no television. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the wall clock. I wasn't trying to process. I wasn't meditating. I was waiting. For what? I didn't know. But somewhere deep in my chest, I felt it coming. Not grief. Not yet. Something colder. Something that would make me ready for what I had to do next. The knock on the door came 3 days later. Soft, almost embarrassed. I knew it was her before I opened it. Not because I recognized the sound, no, it was something deeper. A stillness in the air. The same way you feel a storm before it speaks. I opened the door and there she stood, wearing the same jacket she used to borrow from me in the early months, back when we thought compromise meant love. Her hair was tied back like she didn't want to be noticed, and she carried a tote bag. Not a suitcase. As if she'd just stepped out for milk and wandered too far. She looked surprised that I didn't say anything. Maybe she expected anger, or desperation, or that pitiful, clinging sadness she'd prepared herself to reject. But I gave her nothing. "Can I come in?" she asked, voice thin. I stepped aside, not out of kindness, but because whatever happened next needed to be seen, witnessed, for her and for me. She walked in like a stranger, like she was scared to touch anything. Her eyes darted to the baby onesies still folded on the armchair. The unopened packages from the registry we never canceled. She sat without waiting to be offered a seat. That used to be her house too. Now it was just a place with her fingerprints fading from the surfaces. I stayed standing. She looked up at me and I saw it just for a moment. Guilt. The kind that leaks out when you think no one's watching. But she caught herself. Straightened. "I didn't plan for it to happen like that," she said. I didn't answer. Because she had. She'd written the note. She'd waited for an audience. She'd turned a private wound into a spectacle. And then she'd walked away from the ruins she caused, expecting someone else to sweep the confetti. "I didn't want to lie to you anymore," she added. That was when I felt it. The urge. Not to shout, but to laugh. Not the kind of laughter that comes from joy, but the kind that tastes like rust. Lie to me? She'd been lying for months. Maybe longer. Lying in bed beside me while texting someone else. Lying through every "I love you" spoken without meaning. Lying with her silence, with her distance, with every withheld kiss that pretended to be tiredness. I sat down across from her. My voice was steady. I had to hear it from her. Not because I needed closure, but because truth deserved daylight. "Who is he?" She flinched. Just a twitch. Just enough. "It's not like that," she said quickly. "It is exactly like that," I replied, low and even. She pressed her lips together, then looked down. I watched her. She was good at this, shaping a version of herself that looked like remorse, smelled like sincerity. But I knew her. I knew her rhythms, her tells. "He's someone I met through work," she finally admitted. "It wasn't supposed to become anything. We just connected." Connected. A word people use when they want to make betrayal sound poetic. "So why the party?" I asked. "Why let everyone come? Why wait until then to hand me that note?" Her eyes hardened a bit. "Because I was afraid. Because I didn't want to tell you in private and watch you fall apart. I thought if it was public, maybe you'd hold it together better." And there it was. Her reasoning twisted into concern. She didn't do it to humiliate me. She did it to help me. According to her. I leaned back, let the silence stretch, let her sit with it. "You wanted to watch me break," I said. "But you didn't expect I'd stay standing." She looked away, not in shame, just in annoyance, like my reaction had inconvenienced her narrative. "I didn't expect you to be so calm," she murmured. And then she said something I will never forget. "You're being cold." I stood up slowly, walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, drank half, and set it down with care. "I'm not being cold," I said. "I'm being done." She left not long after.
No tears. No επάλεγεις.
Just a heavy silence between us, and a door that clicked shut a little too politely. It was the last time she came uninvited. But it would not be the last time I saw her. The day after she left, the silence in the house became a living thing. Not peaceful. Not the kind that soothes you, but a breathing, pulsing weight that followed me from room to room. It sat in the corners of the nursery, stretched itself across the kitchen table, curled up beside me on the couch where we once watched movies with fingers intertwined and legs tangled like roots of an old, stable tree. I didn't cry. Instead, I found myself reorganizing drawers, folding baby clothes again, rearranging spoons, staring at the phone not because I wanted to call her, but because I knew she wouldn't. There's something unnerving about being forgotten by someone who used to text you from the next room just to say, "I miss you." That afternoon, a friend came by, uninvited. Liam, the kind who doesn't knock, just steps in like the universe told him something was wrong. He walked in, didn't say a word, just looked around at the remnants of a celebration that had ended in a public execution of my dignity. He picked up a deflated balloon and let it go. It dropped to the floor like everything else. "She really did it," he said softly. I didn't answer. I just poured him coffee, then poured one for myself, as if routine might protect me from the absurdity of what my life had become. "She's with him now?" he asked. "She was with him before," I said. He didn't argue. After Liam left, I opened the email account we used for the baby registry. There were unread messages. One from her, sent the night she left. Subject: "Just so you know." There was no greeting.
No signature.
Just one line. "I'll be staying with someone else. I'll come for my things later." Someone else. Not a friend. Not family. Someone.
No gender.
No title. Just someone. The kind of ambiguity that reveals everything. I should have deleted it, but instead I replied, "I'll pack them for you. Tell me when." No answer. But I didn't expect one. That night I sat in the nursery for hours. No music. Just the mechanical whirl of the mobile slowly spinning above the crib. I stared at it like it was a portal to a life I almost had. I tried to picture our child, what they'd look like, who they'd become. Whether they'd ever understand how their arrival had been dressed in pink and blue but delivered in betrayal. And then came the moment I didn't expect. I felt nothing toward her.
No longing. No hatred.
Just absence. She'd taken the air with her when she left, but I was learning how to breathe in a vacuum. That's when I realized grief wasn't going to be the final stage. There would be something else after it, and I was going to walk toward it without looking back. Packing her things was like performing surgery on a ghost. Every drawer, every shelf, every hanger was a memory waiting to punish me. I wore gloves, not physically but emotionally. I touched her sweaters and shoes like they were toxic. Not because I hated her, but because I didn't want to be reminded of the woman she used to be when she was still mine. I packed everything with care. That part surprised even me. I didn't shred anything, didn't burn old letters, didn't throw perfume bottles into the wall just to watch them shatter. I folded her scarves like she was coming back from a vacation. I wrapped her framed photos in old t-shirts. I even zipped her travel bag with the same rhythm I remembered from the mornings she used to pack for work trips. Trips I now suspected were more than business. There was a knock on the door the following Sunday. Not her. Someone else. A man. Mid-30s. Tall. Polite. Uncomfortable. "I'm here for her things," he said. No name.
No handshake.
I didn't ask who he was. I didn't need to. His eyes did all the talking. He looked at me the way people look at a mechanic after their car breaks down. Grateful but awkward, as if saying, "Thanks for holding it together while she got tired of waiting." I stepped aside. He walked in slowly, as if expecting a trap. I pointed to the hallway. "They're all in the guest room. Labeled." He paused for a second before going in. I followed, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to see him in that space to anchor the reality. As he gathered her things, he tried to speak. "I didn't mean." I stopped him. "Don't. Just don't." He nodded, kept packing. A few times he looked at the nursery door. He didn't ask. He didn't dare. When he was almost done, I noticed something. He wasn't confident. He wasn't proud. He looked afraid. Not of me, but of what came next. Of the woman he'd inherited. He wasn't rescuing her. He was absorbing her aftermath. You think you've won, I said suddenly, my voice calm, even surgical. But you have no idea what you've walked into. He blinked. She burns through people, I continued. She smiles while she does it. You'll think it's passion at first. You'll call it chemistry. Then you'll start making excuses for why your gut keeps twisting. And one day you'll wake up to a silence that used to be love. And you'll wonder when it started slipping away. But you won't leave. Because she's good at that part. Making you stay long enough to blame yourself. He didn't respond. He just zipped the last bag, nodded, and left. I stood there long after the door shut, alone in the quiet. But I wasn't broken. I was just reassembled, differently. That evening I wrote a letter. Not to her. To my unborn child. I didn't start with love. I started with truth. I don't know what kind of world I'll bring you into, I wrote. But I know the kind of father I will be. I won't be perfect. But I will never vanish. I will never lie to protect myself. I will never leave you guessing. And I meant every word. 2 weeks passed. The house was cleaner now. Emptier. But not hollow. It had the strange peace of a stage after a performance. Curtains drawn, lights dimmed, props abandoned where they fell. No more acting. No more audience. I didn't hear from her. Not directly. But people started talking. A coworker texted me late one night. Did you know she's posting pictures with him now? No, I didn't. But I didn't look either. Instead, I focused on the only thing left that still made sense. Preparing for the baby. Doctor appointments. Crib assembly. Insurance forms. Names. I went to the parenting classes alone. Sat beside couples who glanced at me with those half-curious, half-pitying eyes. She couldn't make it? One woman asked, trying to be kind. She won't be coming, I replied. They didn't ask again. Then one afternoon, the unexpected. A message. Not from her. From her sister. It read, she wants to meet. To talk. About the baby. The air felt thicker after I read it. I stared at the words for a full minute. She didn't have the spine to ask herself. She sent someone else. But still I agreed. We met at a park. Neutral ground. No reminders of what had been ours. She wore sunglasses. Large ones. The kind you hide behind. Her hair was neat, her clothes perfectly arranged. As always. But she was nervous. The rhythm of her foot tapping gave her away. I didn't sit right away. I waited for her to speak first. I've been thinking, she began carefully, like she was testing the strength of a frozen lake, about how we could arrange things. Co-parenting. Logistics.
No hello. No im sorry.
Just spreadsheets and visitation schedules. I sat down. Why now? I asked. Why talk now? She hesitated. Then, without removing the sunglasses, said, because I know you're the better parent. I know you'll do this right. I want to be involved. There it was. Her version of accountability. Not regret. Just a strategic admission of my worth now that it served her. I didn't let it land. I went straight to what mattered. You left before they were even born. You walked out and didn't ask once if we were okay. You planned it. You rehearsed it. You performed it. In front of everyone. She shifted uncomfortably. I panicked, she said. I was scared. No, I said. You were selfish. She looked at me then, finally removing the sunglasses. Her eyes were wet, but not crying. Just brimming with a story she wasn't brave enough to tell. You're right, she whispered. But I want to be a part of their life. I have to try. I nodded slowly. You can try, I said. But I'll decide what that looks like. You've lost the right to define anything. She looked down. I stood up. We'll talk again, I said. When I believe you're showing up for someone other than yourself. Then I walked away, calm, whole. Not because I didn't care, but because for the first time in months, I knew who I was again. A letter came the following week. Handwritten. No return address, but the curves of the script betrayed her immediately. She still looped her GS the same way. That little flourish at the end, like she was signing off from a dream she wasn't sure she believed in. I let the envelope sit on the table for a day. I passed it 3 times, glancing but not touching, until something in me grew too restless. I opened it while standing, as if sitting would give it too much weight. It was short. 3 pages, but most of it white space. Carefully chosen words, designed to seem vulnerable without ever admitting guilt. She spoke of confusion, of pressure, of how the idea of being a mother terrified her more than she expected. That the version of herself she saw in my eyes wasn't one she could live up to. But there was a paragraph in the middle, one that sat like a cold stone in my chest. I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. I left because I loved myself more. Maybe that makes me weak. Maybe it makes me real. It was the most honest thing she'd written. And it gutted me not because of what it said, but because of what it confirmed. She hadn't just walked away from me. She had chosen to become the kind of person who could watch someone else hurt and call it liberation. I didn't write back. But I did start writing something else, something I hadn't dared until then. Plan. Not a fantasy of reconciliation. Not revenge. A new rhythm for life. One that didn't orbit her or the mess she left behind. One where I stopped defining myself as the man she betrayed and started becoming the man my child would one day rely on. I scheduled a consultation with a lawyer. Not because I wanted to lock her out, but because clarity had to be earned now. Not given freely. She had the freedom to leave. I would now have the structure to protect what remained. A few days later, I received a second message. This time from her directly. Can we meet again? Just for coffee. No drama. Just talk. It was the kind of message that sounded harmless.
Familiar.
The kind that might have softened me before. But I didn't answer. Instead, I printed the custody paperwork. Not to wave like a threat, but to remind myself this wasn't about old wounds. It was about drawing new lines where the old ones had been erased. Because when a storm passes, you don't rebuild on the same shaky ground. You dig deeper.
U pour concrète.
And you build a home that won't collapse the next time someone walks away. She showed up at the doctor's appointment unannounced. I was sitting in the waiting room, holding a clipboard with intake forms and a list of birth plan options. I looked up, expecting the nurse. Instead, there she was, hair neatly done, clothes carefully neutral, like she had dressed herself in apology. My first instinct was to stand and leave. Not because I was afraid, because I knew she came here to rewrite the story, to make a scene she could later point to and say, "See, I tried." But I didn't move. I looked at her expressionless. Her presence didn't ignite anything anymore. Just a quiet tension, like a violin string drawn too tight. "I thought I should be here," she said. I didn't respond, just nodded toward the empty chair beside me. She sat, hands clasped, knees locked together like a schoolgirl waiting for punishment. "I found a therapist," she offered quietly. Still I said nothing. She was waiting for a reaction, a flicker of recognition. Some sign that I might let her back in, not into my heart, but into the role of the person she'd so casually discarded. She tapped her fingers on her knee, a nervous rhythm. "I read every book I could find," she whispered, "on co-parenting, on rebuilding trust, on forgiveness." There it was, that word, the one people reach for when they want your pain to start benefiting them. When the nurse called my name, I stood up. "She's not on the appointment," I said calmly. The nurse hesitated. "She's the mother," she replied. "She walked out," I said. "She can be involved, but not unannounced. Not like this." The nurse nodded slowly. "Would you like her to wait outside?" I turned to her. "It's up to you," I said. "But what you're doing, it's not about the baby. It's about your reflection. You want to see yourself as good again." She blinked hard. No tears, just the effort of holding back the emotion she hadn't earned the right to display. "I do want to be better," she whispered. I looked her straight in the eye. "Then start by respecting the space between us. That's where the healing begins. Not by stepping back in like nothing happened." I walked into the office without turning around. The appointment was quiet. The doctor spoke about stages, timelines, pain thresholds. But the only thing I heard clearly was the heartbeat of the child I hadn't met yet. Strong, steady, unaffected by the chaos. That sound was the first true moment of peace I'd felt since the party. Afterward, I sat in the car, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the ultrasound photo. I looked at the little silhouette, barely formed, impossibly real, and felt something shift. Love without condition. Not for her. For the ones still on their way. This was no longer about what had been taken from me. It was about what I still had the power to protect. It was raining the morning the custody papers were filed. Not a dramatic storm, just the kind of slow, relentless drizzle that makes the world feel suspended. I arrived at the lawyer's office early, sat in the parking lot for a few minutes, watching the raindrops chase each other down the windshield, listening to nothing but the sound of their soft impacts. The papers were in the passenger seat. A neat folder, neutral language, no accusations, just boundaries. Lines drawn not out of bitterness, but necessity. Inside, the office smelled like new carpet and stale coffee. The lawyer, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a calm voice, reviewed everything with me again. She had no need to ask about the emotional context. The facts were enough. "You're not trying to keep her out," she noted. "You're trying to keep things clean." "Clean is the only thing I can offer now," I said. We signed, initialed, stamped, and just like that, a future began to take shape. One with structure. One where my child would grow up not in the shadow of betrayal, but under the light of something solid and dependable. She called later that afternoon. I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened to it once, only once. "I saw the documents," she said, her voice low, stripped of all performance. "I get it. I deserved that. I'll sign. I just hope someday we can talk again. Not as enemies, just as people who once tried." That was the closest she'd ever come to an apology. But it wasn't enough. Not because it wasn't sincere, maybe it was, but because sincerity alone doesn't rebuild bridges. Especially not the kind you blew up yourself. Later that night, I did something unexpected. I called my father. We hadn't spoken in months. Not because of any argument, just life. I told him everything. Every detail. He didn't interrupt. Just listened, the way you do when you've lived long enough to know not every pain has a fix. "You did right by yourself," he said when I was finished. "You didn't burn. You built." I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that. Then he added something I'll never forget. "Your child's gonna know strength, not by how loud you shouted, but by how quietly you stood your ground." When we hung up, I looked around the house. It was mine now, fully. Not just by title, but by truth. I wasn't sharing it with ghosts anymore. The balloons were long gone. The decorations, too. But in the nursery, a mobile still turned slowly above the crib. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a reminder of what I'd lost. It felt like a promise of everything that was still to come. The day my child was born, the world didn't slow down. It didn't pause for drama or offer poetic symmetry. There was no movie ending. No grand gesture. Just fluorescent lights, tired nurses, and the undeniable sound of a new voice breaking into existence. She was there. Not beside me, but present. The doctors allowed her in. Legally, she had the right. I didn't contest it. This wasn't about her anymore. This was about the child. About not beginning their life with more brokenness than necessary. We didn't speak much in the hospital room. She looked exhausted in a way I didn't recognize. Stripped of her polish, her pride. But she held the baby gently, like she knew that here, at least, she couldn't pretend. I held them after her. I looked down into that small, wrinkled face. Eyes still closed, mouth open slightly, tiny hands flexing against the air. The room faded away. I didn't think of betrayal. I didn't think of court papers or notes in boxes, or hands across tables that weren't mine. I thought of the promise I made. I will never vanish. That was my vow. We named the child together, in a brief, quiet conversation that felt more like diplomacy than intimacy. She offered names. I offered one. We chose mine. She didn't argue. That was the last thing we did as a pair. When the discharge came, we didn't leave together. She had someone pick her up. Car I didn't recognize. She held the baby one last time, kissed their forehead, then handed them to me. Our hands touched just briefly. "Take care of them," she said. I looked her in the eye. "Always." She nodded.
No te ars. No teatrix.
Just that. And then she was gone. Now, weeks later, our routine is quiet, but rich. Diaper changes. Bottles at 3 a.m. Lullabies hummed in the dark. I speak to my child like they understand everything. And maybe somehow they do. Because they smile when I do. Because they quiet when I sing. Because they reach for me first. I've learned that healing doesn't come with fanfare. It arrives slowly in moments too small to post about. A steady heartbeat on a monitor. A yawn from a car seat. A name spoken softly in the night. If I could go back to that party, to the box, the note, the silence, I wouldn't change a thing. Not because it didn't hurt. It did. Deeply. But because that was the moment I learned what kind of man I could become. One who chooses peace over pride. One who doesn't match cruelty with vengeance. One who stands, not because he has to, but because someone small is watching. And to anyone standing where I once stood, holding betrayal in your hands like glass, don't waste time trying to tape it back together. Build something new, even if it starts with silence. Even if it starts alone.